is here today, and my questions will be primarily directed to Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore, I think perhaps the most underappreciated in terms of its harm of all Democrat legislation in the last Congress was the PRO Act, what it would do to just destroy the gig economy, subcontractors, independent contractors, eliminate secret ballots, eliminate right to work, force the payment of union dues through payroll deduction, and so much more. At 10% for all sectors on average, the nation's union membership is declining, thankfully. It's at its lowest level ever, thankfully. But that is skewed because it's 33% for public sector employees, and it's about 6% for private sector. And I would submit that public sector union membership should be illegal. It's contrary to the interests of the taxpayer, the country, and the citizens that we are supposed to serve, and not to mention the fact that public sector employees have highly desirable salaries, benefits, retirement programs, and job security compared to the private sector. Our president promised to be the most pro-union president in history. He kept that promise along with his promise to eliminate reliable energy, his promise to open the border, not to mention the bonus of the unprecedented spending. And the administration is trying to follow through with trying to take action through NLRB and the Department of Labor to implement provisions of the PRO Act because it hasn't been able to successfully become law, thankfully. What do you think is the impact of these pro-union policies, the administration putting their thumb on the scale, trying to force union membership increase in the private sector? What do you think what are your concerns on that impact, primarily on businesses and employers?
Congressman, I agree with everything that you just said, that the real problem is public sector unionism. And the problem is you don't have anybody protecting the taxpayer interest, in the negotiations of the contract. And that's why, most public employees, with respect to, how they compare with their private sector counterparts, depending on the state or whether it's federal, get 20% bonus in terms of salaries and much, much higher benefits. And that's not fair to the people who are paying for their salaries. I just want to make it very clear. I don't think anybody in this room is against unions. Are you against unions?
I am against unions, yes, sir.
Okay, well,
I worked in a union shop in college.
I believe in the First Amendment, that people have a right of association. A union is just association.
I'm not against the right to unionize, but I think it's a terrible decision when you do.
But my point is, look, I'm very much, if people want to form a union, if 6 people want to get together and collectively bargain, that's your right as an American. I'm outraged by the idea that anyone in America should be forced to join a union.
That's right.
Yeah, why? Why should someone be forced to join a union if they don't want to? Pro-choice. So, and just one last point about this. The evidence is crystal clear, undeniable. We have half the states in the United States are right-to-work states, and half of the states are forced union states. Guess where all the jobs are going? Twice as many jobs are being created in the states that have right-to-work laws. When I worked at the Wall Street Journal, as I was saying earlier, we talked to major employers all the time. And they said, you know what? If a state is a forced union state, we don't even think about putting a factory there and so on. The tragedy, unfortunately, what happened to Michigan just a week ago, which had been a right-to-work state and has now turned into a forced union state, and that's going to really hurt the great state of Michigan.
Yeah, businesses and citizens are voting with their feet and fleeing these terrible Democrat-run blue states and these pro-union states and going to right-to-work states, as you said. I would submit that unions have far outlived their usefulness, and this us-against-them mentality is just a terrible thing in the workplace. And again, I experienced that as a college kid working in an auto factory. I want to switch gears for a moment and talk about the labor participation rate. The Biden administration likes to talk about low unemployment. We've got an estimated 7 million able-bodied men ages 25 to 54 not in the workplace, 11 million open jobs, lowest historical labor participation rate. How have the elimination of work requirements and enhanced unemployment, all of that, what are your thoughts on the policies that have caused the low labor participation rate over the last couple of years in particular?
So I'm so glad you asked that, because there's been some misinformation here about the work requirements that were put in place in 1996, which I said are the greatest social policy achievement we've made in 50 years. So I'm just going to really just quickly rattle off the 4 effects of that after 8 years, okay? And then you can decide whether you think it was a success or not. And these are based on, scientific studies. 1, welfare caseloads were reduced by 60%. 60% after welfare reform and work requirements were put in effect. 2, 60 to 70% of those who left welfare went into jobs.
How about that?
They went into jobs. They got a paycheck. Third, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, says that those reforms saved taxpayers and the federal government $50 billion.
Wow.
In today's dollars, that would be a saving of $100 billion. And fourth, and maybe most importantly, child poverty fell every year.
Wow.
Child poverty fell every year after we passed welfare reform. Somebody tell me how
Case
that's
is
not
clear.
a
I'm past
resounding
my
success.
time. Thank you, Mr. Moore. You're exactly right. Thanks for sharing that. I yield back, Chairman.